I grew up in Illinois my whole life, and we come from a very large family. My dad was a soil conservationist, and he got promoted, and so a promotion in our family meant that we moved. And so he worked very hard his entire life, and we moved quite a bit. In fact, when I was in 4th grade, I was in my 4th school, and that was really difficult. It was, grew increasingly shy. And I found art to give me a sense of peace. And I was very happy when I created art. And I wasn't in those stressful situations where I wanted to make friends, but I was afraid to say goodbye to them because I knew that my dad would probably be moving again. And I respect that, because he always worked hard and did the best he could for the family. But I was so drawn to art because I loved drawing, and I love drawing nature. And I drew animals, and I drew plants and trees, and we spent a lot of our childhood outside. My mother and dad, we always lived in a small rural town, and I have 3 brothers and sisters, so we would be outside from the time the sun came up till my mom would yell and scream at us to get back inside when it was time to go to bed. My name is Lori Fuller. I'm a landscape artist. I absolutely love nature. I love outdoors. I love to travel, and I am having the time of my life. My first art class was actually in high school in Brown County, and that was actually my 6th school that we went to. And my first painting I did in 1987, and it was the 2 whooping cranes, and I absolutely thought, this is what I want to do with my life. But of course, as time went on and I ended up getting married and raising a family, I became a school teacher and taught school for 6 years, and then made my way to Champaign. And with being busy with the family, I decided to take a break from art, and ended up, about 3 years ago, picking it up again. Once my kids got to be at an age and I started to develop, more of an interest in art again, I wanted to see what was out there because, growing up in Illinois is a beautiful state. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of beautiful things in our state, but I wanted to go see the Grand Canyon, and I think, that was on my top 10 list. And my top 10 list is 10 plus because it's, talking to people from the local area, whenever we travel, they're, oh, you've got to see this and this and this and this. So there's always more things for us to go, and I know that we're already kind of planning our trip for next summer, and we're going to go to Mount Zion in Utah and Colorado because that's just some place that I just think is truly beautiful, and I think my heart would be so happy there. My medium of choice is acrylic paint on canvas. My first painting, actually in 1987, was an oil paint, and I really enjoyed that paint, but I was like, the smell of working with oil and the mediums really made my stomach upset. So I found acrylic paint, but that wasn't probably until about 10 years ago when I picked up painting again, and I was doing some research, and I liked how oil paint looked, but I didn't like the cleanup and the chemicals that were involved. And just recently I picked up colored pencil, and I was on Facebook, and I'm in a lot of art groups on Facebook, and I use Facebook differently than a lot of other people do. I don't have a lot of friends, but I do, I'm in a lot of art groups. And so I see acrylic paintings from all over the world. And I started seeing some colored pencil work, and I thought, wow, I said, that is really amazing how you can layer colored pencil and have it really represent what you like. And for me, that would be what I find beautiful in nature. And so I started to practice with colored pencils, and it was a lot different than my experience growing up. When I was growing up, I had colored pencils, but I didn't care for them very much because the lead was so hard. And as I started to color or to draw with it, I would quickly see my pencil lines, and I just wasn't real happy with that. So when I saw colored pencils every year as an elementary school, on the school supply list, I was like, why? Why are they asking for this? But so a colored pencil and acrylic are my favorite right now, and I would like to get into printmaking very soon. Just on our last trip to New York, I have a travel journal that I made, and I batiqued the cover and I sewed the pages together so it's a handmade journal that fit in my pocket. And so as I was going on the hikes, I started to sketch some of the compositions that I saw. And I didn't, my goal was to take the colored pencils with me and to start working while they were there, but some of the hikes were very long and I wasn't sure if I would have time to get the drawing done and work with the medium and have time to come back before it gets dark, because it's not real safe to hike in the dark, especially in unknown areas. But I also work from photographs. Like my husband and I will take a lot of photographs as we go on hikes, and I don't mimic them completely because I like to capture what I felt was the essence of that trip. One of the series that I'm working on now is looking at rocks through water, because I think that is so beautiful. I mean, water is so powerful. When you look at water, it can be so still and it can reflect the colors of the trees and it can reflect the sky. And even as one raindrop is adding to that pool of water, it can distort a straight tree into a very beautiful curved line. And those are just lines you just don't see anywhere else in nature. And then, and it distorts the colors and the shapes of the rock below. And it's got all these layers of transparency, and you got leaves that are floating on top. So this last trip, I was really looking at that in specific, and water, how it reflects, how it distorts, how it is so powerful that it can move rocks and it can carve a mountain. And I've seen, just in this last week, we saw 9 waterfalls, and one was right after a heavy rain in New York. And I was just blown away by the water, the force of the water that was coming from the waterfall, when I know that days before that it was just very small trickle, and it was just so moving of how one landscape could change so much. So my next series is going to be looking through water and looking at the properties and how that changes and our ways of thinking. A couple years ago, we had made a trip to western North Carolina, and that area I knew was very famous for their waterfalls. There's a lot of beautiful waterfalls in that area, and I had done some research, and there was one particular waterfall I wanted to see, and that was called Schoolhouse Falls in Panthertown Valley. So we had stayed in Asheville, and it was about, I would say, an hour and 15-minute drive from Asheville to the Panthertown Valley area. We parked the car, and the only thing I had or could find was a PDF map, and it was not very good. It was just a very poor PDF map of that area. So I took that with us, and we parked the car, and my husband at that time was having trouble with his headphones. So I gave him my headphones. Normally we hike with music, and I listen to a variety of music when I hike, but so I had his headphones, and that was a very troublesome hike, because about halfway through the hike, my hiking sandal broke, and I had no way of keeping my shoe on, and I didn't have another pair of shoes in the car, so I had to figure out what I was going to do, because I was so excited to see this waterfall. So I ended up taking the headphones that wasn't working for him, and I tied my shoe to my foot, and we just kept walking and walking and walking, and finally we took a wrong turn somewhere in that hike and ended up with Greenland Creek, and that was the most colorful waterfall I had ever seen. And I remember my husband was it was sprinkling that day, and he was wearing a red jacket, and when I went to go paint the waterfall, my favorite part of that was right underneath the cave where it was hitting this beautiful yellow-green rock, the water was, but the mountain itself was purple and red and brown and green. It was just so beautiful, very, very beautiful. And then when we figured out where we took the wrong turn at, we ended up seeing Schoolhouse Falls, and I ended up doing a colored pencil of that waterfall. But we saw 2 waterfalls on that hike, and at the end of it, I ended up throwing my shoes away and getting another pair of hiking shoes. But that was a very, very fun hike. We had the best time on that hike. Very good time. My husband has a cousin that lives in northern Illinois, and so we went to go visit him, and this was about a couple years ago, and there's a Matheson State Park in that area. And my son was with us that time, and I decided that we'd been in the car for 2 hours and we needed to go on a hike. We needed to go stretch our legs and go experience the outdoors, because I just think that is so important. And so we went there, we were hiking, and I saw one of the waterfalls over there, but what caught my eye was where there was a log, and the log had like roots that were coming out of it, but it was more like an indigo color. It was just, the color itself was something I never remember seeing before, but what caught my eye was the water and the rocks coming through the water, and it was just incredibly beautiful. So I thought, I need to capture that in a painting, because that was just one of the highlights of the trip. I mean, the waterfalls there were pretty, but that's what really that highlighted the whole trip was that composition, that colors and the rocks and the water. It was just really pretty over there. The Grand Canyon was one of my favorite trips. We had decided to take the Amtrak all the way to Flagstaff, and that was the first time we had never taken a train trip that was like 28 hours long. We were on the train for 28 hours, and we met so many interesting people. I brought my art supplies and was in the drawing a lot of the time, but we really met some interesting people. And we get to Flagstaff, and we actually spent a day in Sedona, and there was a beautiful canyons there. We went on a Jeep ride there and saw the beautiful red canyons that were so beautiful. But the Grand Canyon had been on my list for a long time, and so we spent one day at the Grand Canyon, and I decided to take Hermit's Trail, which is one of the last trails on the rim. So we actually had to ride the bus for an hour and a half to get to this trail. It was a beautiful hike all the way down, and then when we started coming back up, the sun started getting very hot, and so we were only able to walk like 25 steps at a time to find some shade and to take a drink before we were able to get back to the top. So I would say it took about 3 times as long coming back up and climbing back up to the Grand Canyon and getting to the bus, but it was a very, very beautiful. I had 4 paintings that I'd done from that hike, and I plan on doing more. I have never painted a person in all my paintings I've done. I've never had a person in there, and there's actually, if you look in the corner of that painting, there's a shadow, and that's my husband taking the picture in the camera. And I decided to do that one because that was right before I fell. and when I did fall, I saw, looking at the canyon that was on the other side, it was like red and blue. It was just, I remembered that image, but I liked that part of the path, and it was just, I don't know, I decided, I was just drawn to trying, to paint it. I don't know, it's just really pretty. And that's the only painting that I've ever done that's got a person in it, and it's, yeah, that's me. I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son, and we love to do art. We spent some time when we lived in Kelowna. We had art time at our kitchen table every night from about 6 to 7:30. And my daughter draws the fantastic drawings of people. And I would be working on a painting at the time. That was before I got interested in colored pencil. And my son would be drawing these fantastic maps of people and villages and this whole world, and it was just a really good time to share. We shared stories, we laughed, we listened to music. It was just, I just had a great time, and my daughter comes over today, even now, because she only lives about 1.5 miles from me, and we still do art time at the table, and it's just a really fun experience. I just recommend every family to do that. Just to spend some quality time together and have fun, enjoy each other's company.